Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major! Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Almost Major, where we talk about the many major studios and the films they released. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Bryden Doyle.
Hello. Or bonjour, as I should say.
We are in a bathtub right now, speaking French with Charlie Nash.
Hello. I've got my flippers on. I've got my yellow poncho.
And we are talking about the Red Violin from 1998 today. This premiered at Venice and TIFF in September 1998. Released in Canada before the US, you bastards, in November 13th, 1998. Well, it is a Canadian production, so I understand. I think it was also the same thing with Last Night, that screened in 98 and then US in 99.
Yep.
Released in the U.S. on June 11th, 1999 in 13 theaters, maxed out at 261 theaters. The budget for this is $10 million. Opening weekend, it did $87,133 and domestic and overall gross of $10 million. Top 5 films that weekend, the U.S. weekend, is Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Notting Hill, Instinct, The Mummy, and Entrapment. That's 6 movies, but whatever. I couldn't leave off Entrapment, I guess.
Speaking of Entrapment, so we talked about Billy Ray a few weeks ago, and I watched Breach as research, and there's the whole running thing throughout the movie is that Chris Cooper's FBI agent is sexual deviant or whatever, whacking off in his office, and there's a scene where he's watching Entrapment or looking up clips of it on his computer, and he asks Brian Phillippe, what do you think of the look of this woman? And Phillippe's yeah, she's great, and then he just walks out. Anyways.
Did you see her go underneath the beams? I'm gonna play it again. Yeah.
There's also, it's funny we're bringing up Phantom Menace because there was a Twitter trend recently that was what did you think when you saw this in theaters? And I tweeted this and then I deleted it at first, but I was just I don't know, I was 9 years old and thought it ruled. I thought it was the best movie ever. It wasn't until Attack of the Clones that I thought, oh, we're in trouble, even at 11. But I was going to ask, Kevin, did you see Phantom Menace in theaters? And Bryden, were you alive when it came out?
I was alive. I watched it on VHS, though, at home. That's how I watched it.
I think, because what is this? June 11th, blah, 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 blah. So it came out late May. I think I probably would have seen it when I was going on my family reunion, and I remember there's a weird mixture of movies that I saw like that. I saw Shrek when I was in my family reunion around that time, and I think I did see that in theaters. I don't really have a memory of it, but I think so. But I do remember having that VHS, of course, when it came out.
Oh, yeah, and it was the first Star Wars that was on DVD, too, because I got it. Also, my apologies, Bryden, I didn't mean for that to come off as offensive. No. I'm sorry.
Were you even breathing back then?
It's totally fine.
Well,
it's mind.
I mean, it's when we tease, this is terrible, but we tease our younger coworkers, where were you on 9/11? And they were just shut up!
Did you have consciousness back then? Were you?
Yeah.
Number 1 song in the U.S. this week is "If You Had My Love" by Jennifer Lopez, and number 1 song in Canada on the November 13th, 1998 weekend was "Sweetest Thing" by U2. 1998 in Canada was just U2 crazy, and also for when we're talking about Ameros Perros, also that's a U2 song. Canada couldn't get enough of late era Bono. I don't know, man.
That was my gateway to U2 because I had the album Now 2 that my parents bought for me, and The Sweetest Thing was on that one. That was my whole intro to U2.
Isn't Sweetest Thing that's not a 90s song, or it's a very early one? It is? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was one that was kind of, but it was one that got re-released and then got big or something like that.
It was track 5 on that album because I listened to it so much as a kid. That was one of the few albums I owned when I was 8.
Oh, here's the Wikipedia thing. It was originally released as a B-side on the Where the Streets Have No Name single in 1987, and then later re-recorded and re-released as a single in October 98 for the compilation album Best of 1980s and 1990. I know Where the Streets Have No Name. That's an all-timer for me, but I don't know Sweetest Thing, unfortunately.
I think it was in the trailer for every movie for 3 years around this time. I'm pretty sure it was in the Mr. Deeds trailer. I think it's even in Mr. Deeds.
It was definitely in Mr. Deeds where he and Winona Ryder go down the stairway on bicycles or something.
Oh, and then what was it? They like him and Winona like buy some bikes off of some kids, and they're just like, "What are you gonna do with your money? Drop out of school?" And the homeless guy's like, "You don't need school. Look at me!" And they're just like, "Ah!" and run off.
I should have known I was gay when I saw Mr. Deeds in theaters, and I was so moved by Winona Ryder coming clean to Adam Sandler. And it's like really the soppiest scene in the world. And I was like, she's a great actress. And she is. I adore Winona and that was the beginning of my Winona phase, that and Beetlejuice. But like I watched that scene now and I was like, yeah, 10-year-old Charlie was so deeply moved by Winona Ryder confessing she's a fraud.
You like her acting and you're moved by emotion. That must mean you're gay.
Get his ass. Just watching a movie with your friend, and it's just like, what'd you think of that scene, huh? Did it really emotionally hit you? You got something to say? Yeah.
Well, I do remember that both my parents like really shat on her. They all bought into the whole bullshit shoplifting thing.
Motherfuckers needed something after 9/11 just to collectively hate.
My dad especially hated Winona Ryder, and now even they're more into Stranger Things than I was. I only watched the first season, and now they finally come around on her. But I remember like being like, "Mom, don't you think Winona is a great actress?" And she was like, "Sure." And I was just like, it was after Mr. Deeds, and I was like, "What do you think of the movie?" It was fine. Like that type of like.
If you'll excuse me, I need to go pick up my "Don't Free Winona" shirt. Yeah. Plot description from Google: the intricate history of a beautiful antique violin is traced from its creation in Cremona, Italy in 1681, where the legendary violin maker, played by Carlos Cecchi, paints it with his dead wife's blood to keep her memory alive. My version on Tubi had like Slipknot playing when that happened. I don't know which version y'all had, but to an auction house.
That's like the twist reveal and everything. It's like, it's painted with her blood. That's like the thing.
Yeah, I thought I read somewhere about that, but then I was like, oh, it's not in the first part. And then at the end, I was just like, oh wow.
I'm also imagining Vera Farmiga's like head just popping up as a background thing, like doing the cover of it. What did she do? Duality that she posted on Instagram recently? Yeah,
Hell
that shit ruled.
Hopefully she's doing that because she's going to cover it for the soundtrack of the new Conjuring movie. That would kick ass. To keep his dead wife's memory alive, blah, blah, blah. To an auction house in modern times, Montreal, where it draws the eye of expert appraiser, played by Samuel Jackson. Over the years between, the violin travels through 4 different countries where it has a profound impact on all those who own it. Or they just have it when bad things happen. I don't know. Written by Don McKellar. Prior to this, he wrote Dance Me Outside, which is a good movie. The same year, directed and wrote Last Night. Listen to our episode. And it is co-written by, buddy, I'm from Oklahoma, Francois Girard.
Francois Girard. That's it. Yeah.
Francois Girard.
And they previously worked on Girard's previous movie, 32 Short Films About Glenn Gould, which I have not seen and I have heard is actually very good, but I was not able to get to it for research.
I know the 32 Stories About Springfield, or whatever that episode is. The Simpsons. It's not 32, it's like 18? I don't know.
Something like that. It's directed by him. Prior to this, like he said, 22 short films about Glenn Gould in 1993. After the Silk in 2007, Boy Choir in 2014, and The Song of Names in 2019. Starring no less than, hold on, checking my notes here, like 291 actors, I believe.
I mean, 85 speaking parts is the stat that they give in the IndieWire interview that I read with Girard from the 90s. 5 countries, 60 shooting days, 85 speaking parts, 5.5 years in the making, and $10 million.
It's a very ambitious movie, for sure.
Nobody can say otherwise. So, like, after I went through, like, the first 10 people on IMDb, and they had not really been in anything else, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to say that Samuel Jackson's in it, Jason Fleming's in it, Sandra Oh's in it, Don McKellar's in it. Ton of fucking people in it.
Couldn't believe they just brought Sandra Oh in there to raise a paddle in an auction.
Oh, yeah, they did her dirty.
I'm sure Don McKellar was just like, so I'm working on this movie, and like after we're done with Last Night, do you want to just like, I don't know, what, can you go like this? Can you audition for me real quick? Just lift your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, there also the middle segment with the violinist who gets off, just to put it mildly. Like, I could have sworn that guy was Jonathan Pryce, and I was like searching for what felt like at least 7 minutes, where I was like, that's absolutely Jonathan Pryce, and I had to look through the cast, and I was just like, he's got to be in here somewhere. No, okay.
Spoken like a man who hasn't seen Deep Rising. He's one of the mercs in that.
You know what? Guilty as charged. So
no, it's all good. He's just like one of those Jason Fleming. He's like one of those British character actors who's just in like a billion things. And the other big Canadian actor in this is Combe Fior, who plays the auctioneer. He's in a lot of Canadian movies. He's also like in a lot of American movies. Like he's Aaron Eckhart's like evil right hand man in Paycheck or whatever.
A John Woo blind spot for me.
It's not very good, although there is
a scene. Is that a blind spot? Is it?
I mean, look, I love John Woo's. He's a legend. It's got to pay respect to my elders here. I mean, I got to see it at some point.
It's like whatever, but Fior does have maybe the funniest moment in the movie where he's supposed to be like killing Ben Affleck, but he gets away or whatever, and Aaron Eckhart like says like, why is he like free? What were you doing when you're supposed to be guarding him? And Combe Fior says, I was having some cherry pie, and then Aaron Eckhart like whips around and like glares at him, and it's like it's very funny.
Wasn't that movie released on like Christmas or something, and it was a total flop?
Maybe, I don't know. Let's see.
It was like that in the Peter Pan.
Yes, it was Christmas 2003. Good memory.
Yeah. Again, the amount of things
counter-programming.
that could
what do you want?
Improve the quality of my life that I could actually retain and use to make my life better. And instead, I'm like, yeah, John Woo movie that is hated that I've never seen. That came out on Christmas. Gotta store that somewhere. Yep.
I feel like Paycheck came out around the same time as The Core. I could be wrong.
Same year.
Wow.
But
yeah,
let's see if it was the same month.
I was in Best Buy a couple weeks ago and The Core was on 4K, and I know that film has its passionate defenders, and I was like, I walk out with this? And but they
You're
were
also
like,
just like, of all the movies that need a 4K, they were just like, we need the movie with fucking DJ Qualls, all right? We need it on 4K.
What's turning 20 this year? Throw a dart at a name of a wall of names.
Yeah. Trivia. Won the Academy Award for Best Original Score. Sure. The film takes place in 1681, 1793.
Wait a minute. I love how you're like that is the one thing I feel like we can universally agree upon is that the score is beautiful, and you're like, sure.
It's a pretty good score.
It's cool.
But what do you think about the choice to have it be that like the movie is about the power of the violin, that the violin producing this music and everything, like the violin itself is like meant to be powerful, but then like he overloads it with like non-diegetic score that like kind of like drowns out the actual sound of the violin. What do you think about? I mean, that's like sort of like a weird thing. It was like, you know, I feel like I'd be getting a lot more impact of the music that is being made with this violin if you weren't playing like a separate piece of score. Anyway, sorry, that's just maybe my own
I think that's a
thing.
very good point, and I didn't even consider it until now. And now I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I agree with that.
But no, like as itself, and there are moments, like especially like when Jackson is like plunging into his obsession, where it is like these very like shrill strings that like does create like a nice sort of atmosphere of moodiness, which I feel like is like otherwise lacking in the movie. But yes, we'll get to that.
It won. It was nominated against American Beauty, Angel's Ashes, Cider House Rules, and Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah.
I know all of us are big Angela Ashes fans. But I'm sorry that didn't.
I mean, I have not seen that or Cider House Rules. I do vividly remember the score of American Beauty because I watched that movie a ton as a teenager, and yikes. I love Talented Mr. Ripley, and I'm failing to think of the score right now, but I do know that American Beauty, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we started the episode, but American Beauty was the front runner, and I believe this was an upset.
Probably.
I mean, I guess so. It's funny, like I was looking to see if Red Violin, like not only, like I was surprised that it won, but it also was like the only thing it got nominated for.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I would see that as an upset probably. But it's probably just Oscar voters are like, well, this movie's about music. I think it should win. Yeah. What was it? The film takes place in 1681, 1793, the late 1890s, the late 1960s, and 1997. When Frederick Pope leans back in the tub with a letter from his lover in hand, the shot is a recreation of the famous painting The Deaf and Marat.
Oh.
It's neat. The violin in this film is based on an historical 1720 Stradivarius violin named the Red... The Red Mendelssohn? The Red Mendelssohn? What?
Ben Mendelsohn?
Well,
Yeah.
I actually read an interview like from like 2018 where I think Gerard said it wasn't exactly based on that one. He said like a good number of instruments have been called red violins. That's like the quote that I'm reading. The varnishes have a tendency to become reddish through oxidation. The seed idea of the movie was to use human blood in the composition of the varnish and inject some human DNA, soul, essence into the instrument and see that transpire through music. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically the same plot as Cloud Atlas.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Red Mendelsohn. I wonder if Ben is getting any royalties off of that. That's funny. It's like, no, it's based on a different Red Violin. It's just like them coming out and being like, well, James Franco's character in Spring Breakers is not really based on riffraff. It's based on, an amalgam. It's like, it is. Come on. You just don't want to get sued.
The last sale of the evening, the star of the night, the so-called Red Violin. Who will start us off?
Prophecy foretold of a masterpiece
Maestro.
that would be born of tragedy.
These peoples from the Vales have given us some figures. So what we need now is
Professional opinion. You ever heard of the Red Violin?
Sure, I have stories.
What you're saying is, anyway, true. People could get a little excited.
Destined to wander across the ages and never to rest.
This is the single most perfect acoustic machine I have ever seen.
Is our little red violin the red violin?
Now, the time has come
Guess I never thought I'd find it.
when it will reveal itself once more.
Here she is now, Lot 72, the so-called Red Violin.
Its beauty bewitches. Its perfection astounds.
600,000,
Its mystery endures.
700,000, 1,100,000, 1,300,000, 2,400,000. So,
The Red Violin.
But yeah, that's all the trivia I have. Bryden, I think you have some more trivia facts for us.
Yeah, he talked about how like it was really tough, like shooting in Shanghai. Like that was kind of the thing where they were worried, where like there were a lot of cops like swarming it, where they were worried about like it was gonna be like they were worried about like it being, they were worried about like people like taking photos and then like that being distributed and then like giving the idea of like a cultural revolution again or something like that. This is obviously dealing with like Chinese history that I'm like not quite familiar with and everything, but it is. But yeah, it was like one of the things where he was like kind of worried about how like getting that actual part of the shooting done and how like just like how exhausting it was like working on the movie for like 5.5 months and I think because like he had to like he would like shoot in like one section of the movie in one place and then fly to another place and then fly to another and another and it just like sounds exhausting to make this movie. Like I said, they've like this movie's been popular I guess because it has there were like a lot of like concerts where like they would play the movie with like live orchestra accompaniment, which I know that's like a thing that they do a lot with movies that aren't even music related, but like this it's especially notable I think for this movie since it's like such a big part of it. I'm sorry if I'm just searching for my notes. If I think of anything else, I mean, it was like I guess sort of helpful, like reading some of like Gerard's thoughts on like what he thinks the whole takeaway from the movie is. Because I got to be honest, I watching this movie, I was like, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to take away from this, especially after 2 hours and 10 minutes of this. But
I have to be honest. There's a Strangers with Candy episode in which Jerry plays the violin, and she literally gets up in front of everybody and says, "What I've learned today is the violin is an evil instrument that causes nothing but harm," and that's all I thought about watching this movie.
But like I don't think that was like Gerard's takeaway I with the movie as well, where like he's talking about like how it's like about music as a character, but it's a film about love and immortality. And I guess it's like I guess, but like
I guess
I mean it doesn't like especially with like the Samuel L. Jackson character at the end where like he's like driving himself away from his family and everything by like being obsessed with this violin, but then it's like this heartwarming note where he's like, "Sweetie, I have a gift for you when I get back home," or whatever. And it's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't really give a shit that he steals a violin at the end. I don't care. I think it's ridiculous, frankly, that they're selling an instrument for like $2 million. Like, get the fuck out of here with that. But like, it's I don't know. It's like I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to take away with it. Yeah.
And also, he is like the biggest piece of shit ever through the entire
He's
thing.
such an asshole. He takes his anger out on like all these people below him who are just working at a hotel or service workers or something. I'm like,
yes,
I don't give a shit about this guy. Like,
I only give a shit about him because he's played by Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes,
he's a compelling actor, but like
I'm always he's always watchable, but I'm just like, what are
he
the
like
stakes
went
here?
in on that hotel lobby person. Like,
come pregnant.
It's like that scene in Uncut Gems where he goes to the auction and he clearly takes it out on the woman just working at the desk, but like Uncut Gems knows that that's like not cool and also gives her some agency, and it's funny. And like here, I know that the movie's saying he's a piece of shit, but it's like it's not interesting to watch Samuel L. Jackson just scream at someone who's already got a tough job to begin with, and that's just one person who already has to deal with an array of bullshit from these people. So,
and somebody's like, I'm just gonna freshen up your room, and he's just like, hello, don't nobody come up to my, I'm working on my violin.
I don't want any chocolates on my pillows. Yeah.
No, I mean, this just it seems like this is like this is kind of the last big thing that he's known for. I feel like Gerard. I mean, he continues to make movies, but like we said, like
for a
some
second,
of the movies
I thought you were implying Samuel L. Jackson. I was like, Bryden.
Oh no,
he had Formula 51 after this. Fuck off. Yeah.
No, but like Gerard, I mean, like I can name like I know some of the movies he's made, but like Boy Choir, Silk, Son of Names. These are movies that like do not really get talked about. Like Son of Names, that was a movie I saw a preview for like back in 2019. It was like, no thanks,
right.
I'm okay. Like and you know they don't really get discussed. I feel like this is kind of I mean, not to like shit on him or anything, but like it's this. I don't know. This and 32 short films about Glenn Gould, I feel like are the only ones I hear about vaguely at all. And even this one, I feel like is. I mean, our friends, our friend Dan Mecca and Connor O'Donnell, they did what was it?
Samuel Jackson B-side.
B-side, and this was the one that they talked about. Yeah.
Which
so,
yeah, it's a fucking B-side for him.
For sure.
Absolutely.
It seems more so that it's just like this is the one. Kind of like with Leah Poole, it's like this is the one that crossed over, and then she's making French movies that don't really come over here, so we don't know what they are. Maybe they're big in France or in Canada or something like that. But it's just like Silk and all these other movies I'd never heard of. But
I will say, I think I glanced the Wikipedia real quick, and Don McKellar was against himself for last night with some Canadian awards, and I think this took like almost of them.
Unfairly. Last Night
Unfairly,
is way
to be
better
sure.
than this.
Last Night is one of my favorite movies we've ever covered on this podcast, and this is just fine. Not to give myself away, but
no, it's totally fine.
But this is also a film that screams of like not to be like it's more self-important than something like Last Night.
I mean, yeah, that you get reading just a couple of interviews with Francois Girard, and maybe it's me imagining him saying this in a French accent that just makes it heightened. But like he says, films are like children. You put them into the world, and they have their own lives. They grow up and I don't know what accent I'm doing. I'm gonna stop this. They grow up and become somebody.
Keep going.
Good or bad or whatever. The Red Violin turns out to have had a wonderful life, and it doesn't want to die. And then I wrote in my notes, "D'accord, mon ami." But it doesn't.
This film. Not to mention, this film also kills children and implies bad things will happen to children in this movie. So why is he mentioning children in this?
Well, you know what it brings to mind? It brings to mind the line that Samuel L. Jackson has about the violin.
He's like, "Do you have any kids?"
Yeah. But that is crazy. The cut where it's like the kid just gets such bad stage fright that he collapses, and then it just cuts to his funeral. That's like
I couldn't believe that shit.
It's just like a comedy cut, but they play it so somberly.
Not to mention that when he not to go too far into it, but the shot of him collapsing and him just laying there is like at least 5 seconds long, and then it just cuts to like, with the coffin. I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
It reminds me whenever this might be, you might not know this, but it was, I'm pretty sure it was like a later Simpsons episode where Snowball dies, and then Lisa keeps trying to get a new Snowball, and it just keeps dying over and over and over, and it just keeps cutting to the new grave over and over and over.
That makes me think of the Saturday Night Live sketch where it's Tracy Morgan is playing a filmmaker's promoting this movie Rocket Dog, and every time it's like every time the dog runs out of screen, they flash up like a tribute to the dog that died, and they're playing Life is a Highway. They keep having the cut like 5 different times in the sketch. It's so funny.
It's so funny you mentioned this. I thought you were going to mention this Simpsons episode, Kevin, because this is what I thought of, but it's the Frank Grimes episode where he just loses his mind and goes, "Oh, I don't need to wear gloves when touching wires because I'm Homer Simpson." And it just cuts to the dung, and he's just everybody at his funeral.
Yeah. So that's all the trivia we got. Initial thoughts. Who wants to go first? Too bad, Charlie.
Sure. I watched this thing like 2 hours ago. It is a beautiful movie to look at. The production design is immaculate. The costumes, my word. They put so much effort into this thing that I feel bad that I had very little response to it. Like, it's like a 3 out of 5 for me, where I'm like, I don't dislike this by any means per se, in terms of like, it's not like I can say anything about this is bad. It's just, and I deeply admire and respect the artistry on display here. Every story starts off and I'm starting to get invested, and then Bryden and I were talking about this before we started recording the episode, but everything starts to go into motion, and then it all takes an abrupt turn. Like, every single story just takes an abrupt turn, and then you're kind of like, and on to the next one, and you're kind of like, wait, what? Like, okay, it was just starting to gain momentum, and then, like, every single one of these, and to be fair, even as the movie went on, like, I think the 4th out of the 5th story is the one that's set in Mao's communist China, which I was like, oh shit, this is like really different. Like, we're really gonna get into some fascinating, provocative political stuff here. And then that one just kind of gets truncated even worse than the previous ones. So
which is weird because the stakes are so high in it, where like they're like raiding her home and like it's gonna destroy her marriage because her husband is like loyal to the Republic. It's like, and then it just ends. Like, it's like, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm eating into your thoughts. But
no, I actually appreciate that, because you're absolutely right. Where I was like, these stakes are so high, and as someone, you know, who, like, I think, look, we all do a podcast about movies. We all deeply care about art and the importance of art and how it spans across, you know, various cultures, various generations of history, what have you. And then just to have them all truncated at the end, I was just kind of like, no, none of these are in any way bad. They kind of, every single story took like a little too long to get their hooks in me. And then once they finally had their hooks in me, it was like, and we're moving on to the next one. And I was just kind of like, no, like, why? And then by the time Samuel L. Jackson has the whole heist thing happening, I just wanted the thing to be over, which like, and he's such a piece of shit. I don't know. It's we're gonna get into this in the Amores Perros episode too, but this is also a movie in which bad things happen to people for no reason, and I don't know what the Red Violin is supposed to say about like what Bryden, we were talking about this, and we were all talking about this in the group chat, but like what like violin, you know, playing the violin, being a part of an orchestra, what have you, that is a beautiful form of art. Why is it so cursed? Like, why, what is this thing saying about art or caring about history or caring about any of this? It just feels kind of subtly cruel in weird ways. I don't know. Like every story has the same outcome. And
violence.
Yeah, I just don't really know what this movie's getting at, other than, you know, like, kind of the obvious, but also, why is that the message?
And like it's also like they're cherry picking like the most tragic stories, but like you see other people who are just like chilling playing the violin. Like, it's like their whole montage of like orphans and everything, like playing like the violin. It's like, well, I mean, I guess they died because like you age and you die, and when you die when you're old and everything, but it's like, it doesn't mean like the violin killed them. Like, it's like they're just like passing it on. It's, I guess, the people who have the gift, they're the ones who are. But like, even like the Chinese character, she doesn't like die. She just has to get the violin away because she doesn't want to get caught with it. And it's like, okay, I guess she's fine.
What I really wanted this to be halfway through was like, I wanted this to be a horror movie after a while, because I was like, is this prestige drama?
I mean,
it's just kind of flat. But if it's a horror movie where it's going to slowly evolve into like the violin is cursed, or it has a disease or something, that would have been more interesting. But like here, it's just kind of like, well, it's just circumstantial, and I'm like, well, what am I supposed to take away from that?
if you know anything about me, you should know that a multi-century spanning story of a violin through different languages and cultures is just what you think of my taste. No, I'm kidding. So this isn't exactly something that I'm inherently going to latch onto. Not saying that, I mean, I was kind of dreading it because I was like, I doubt this is going to bowl me over, and it's also 2 hours long. And, I was excited to see, anthology movies are very hard to get wrong. And I don't know if this is technically an anthology, if it's a fractured narrative. I don't know. It's pretty much an anthology. Yeah. It's really hard to get right, but I'm always very curious on anthologies because it's mostly like, oh, one part was good. That's it. And it's just like, well, I'm not going to remember a movie because 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 parts of it was good. But when they're good, they're great. But, and this would go into my thoughts about Amores Perros and Inarritu as a whole when we get to that. Yeah, they're very hard to do. We have like 5 different 25-minute segments here, and all of them seem to fall pretty short. It isn't until the last segment that things feel like they actually like start moving, and that's not just because it's the only one in English. It's just finally seems like there's some momentum, and then but all the other segments seem to have not much story to tell besides the first and the last one. Since the last one definitely goes back to the first one and seems to bring it all together, it seems like 2, 3, and 4 are kind of just in there to be in there to like get it to 1997. They get some other anthology films that are successful in their brief stories as it pertains to the overall stories, like Night on Earth. Like every segment rules and every single one works together to build this environment of overnight in different cities around the world too. So it's very similar.
Speaking of Winona Ryder, she and Jenna Rollins are the first segment. Man. How can you not love that? I mean, goddamn.
So good. So good. That was my first Jarmusch, and I was just like, 10 out of 10. What else you got?
And that's considered, not to break away, but some people consider that minor Jarmusch, and I don't understand.
Oh, hell no.
I don't understand that at all. That movie fucking rules. Yeah.
My favorite is Stranger Than Paradise, but that one's not that far behind. Like, Lesser Jarmusch is like The Limits of Control or whatever that snooze fest is
Dead Don't Die.
Like,
Dead Don't Die is the only Jarmusch film I've disliked. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beyond lesser. That's like, we don't talk about that. That's fine. You know what's funny? Like zombies, they come back to life and they're like, "Where's the Wi-Fi?" That's hilarious. Like that is satire right there. That's clever. I don't know. He's had like 13 movies and pretty much all of them are good. He can have a stinker. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, this was pretty much. It was there for me, like you were saying, Charlie. It's like pretty, and the score is good. It's just I was listening to it and I'm like, of course this won best score. Like it has Oscar movie best score of the 90s written all over it.
And it's present throughout the movie, like so that like it sticks in your brain, I guess. Like it's yeah.
And like I was saying, it's a movie about music, of course, like the best score, it's the type of thing where it's like, well, I was going to say like Boyhood in editing, but it's just like, well, Boyhood did win editing, but something where like the most editing is going to win best editing, the most acting, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of about people who are like, music is my life, and the music is great, but it doesn't really shine in terms of like why music is their driving passion. It's always something else that's interfering with it that is weird to me, and not in any way other than just bad luck. It's all like screenplay contrivances.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll get into my initial thoughts, I guess. Yeah, I mean, like, the whole thing that was interesting is, like, I mean, you bring up an anthology film is, like, John McKellar in an interview with Variety, he was, like, saying that, like, one of the things that was fun was the extreme difference between periods and eras and trying to make it a coherent biography and not like an anthology film. And this is sort of, like, the point of what the movie's really interested in is, like, they wanted to do the biography of an instrument. It's interesting they talk about biography of an instrument, not so much the people, which contrasts with what Gerard is saying in a later interview where he says... we are touching something that is very human. All musical instruments are emulation of the only true instrument, which is the human voice. There is something extremely human in the making of such an instrument. This is what the film was tapping into by injecting the human soul into the making of an instrument. And this is something that we'll talk about where it's what are you actually interested in? Are you actually interested in these people as people or for the music that they make? Seems like it's more the latter. I mean, yeah, like you said, Charlie, it does feel pretty hollow, like these people where it's like, well, man, I like to have sex and play the violin. And now this person's gone, and now I'm sad, and I smoke opium and still try to have sex while playing the violin. Which I was joking with you, Charlie.
I felt personally attacked by that because I was just like, okay, you didn't have to put me on blast. Like, I smoke opium a little bit and play the violin a little bit, but it's not like this.
Yeah, you took a hit of it right before we started this podcast, and I was just like, Jesus, Kevin.
And then there was like a telephone ringing for 15 minutes, and then Robert De Niro showed up. Yeah, whatever.
I was joking with Charlie that the character who likes to play the violin while having sex with his girlfriend, that made me think of the scene in Swordfish where it's like, you have to hack this computer while also getting your dick sucked.
You have to play Brahms on the violin while getting topped, yeah.
They also introduced that character as the devil. And then it's like a twist like, oh, wait, the violin is the devil. And I'm like, but wait, why? What?
Because it's red.
Yeah, but what is it? Like that, it always is like, okay, now we're really gonna get into a story that's like about the evils of this thing or something, and it's just kind of like, it's just there. I don't know, like.
Yeah.
Like,
there's individual bits in the various stories that I enjoy. Like, I do think it's funny in that Jason Fleming segment in England where it's like the one composer is super huffy when he says like, all right, so this guy can't show up, but if you really want to stay, you can watch me play my rendition of this, and then immediately the people just start filing out of the theater. That is that is really funny. But like, yeah, Charlie, I agree with you that like all these segments feel like they're just as they're about to ramp up into intensity. Like, especially the one in Shanghai where like I said, the stakes are so high. It's just like, then she just gives the violin to this guy, and then I don't know, that's it. And then like we don't know what else happens to her, and it's like, yeah, and like the only segment that like it's maybe a bit of an unfair question to ask with like intersecting storylines, but like I think of like Christy Lemire's critique of the movie New Year's Eve, the Gary Marshall film. Stay with me here, where she said like the question she asked watching the movie was like, would I want to watch any of these individual stories as their own like story stretched out to feature length? And sometimes that's not fair. Sometimes things are meant to be short form stories, and that's fine and good. But it is like a thing where I'm watching, I'm like, I would really only, like, the Samuel L. Jackson thing where he's an art appraiser who becomes obsessed and, like, loses the integrity of his job because this violin just gets to him. And then, like, plotting to steal it from, like, these auctioneers. I could totally see that being a movie. Maybe not a 2-hour and 10-minute movie, but, like, a nice 90-minute, like, thriller? Yeah, I'd be totally into that, especially because...
watch the first half hour of Femme Fatale, but whatever.
Sure, yeah. Or Thomas
say that
Crown
about
Affair, if we're talking
everything.
about art heist. Yeah.
It's fair.
Yeah, but it also helps that, like, I mean, not to like diss the actors in the movie who come before Samuel L. Jackson, like I think Jason Fleming and Greta Scacchi and all the other actors. Some of them I'm not quite as familiar with because I'm somewhat spotty with some international strains of cinema and everything. But like they're good actors, but like it really does, like, Samuel L. Jackson's still stepping into this movie, and like he's one of those actors who, like, when he's given, even if he's given like a thin part, he has like enough charisma and enough like variation in his line readings to like make like just like grab your attention as an actor and everything. So even though his character is very noxious in the movie, I found it like to be definitely the most watchable segment of the movie, and the one again with like high stakes where it's like, yeah, he's like putting his job on the line for this one violin. But yeah, I don't know, and this is another thing too, I guess, to maybe think about. The movie is like commenting on like, with like especially like the Austrian guy, who the kid in Austria, where like his mentor is like saying like, you need to speak French and everything, and this thing is good because it's French, and like praising like European supremacy, which, and it seems like the movie is like working at this critique. Do you think the movie does much with that critique throughout the rest of the movie? And I'm wondering especially if there's something here that the movie's doing where at the end of the movie, it's like a large, I mean, at the auction it's like a lot of white European people and like Canadians and everything, but there's also Chinese bidders there, but also like the fact that the person who takes the violin is a Black American and everything. Do you think that the movie, and especially because there's the thing that sticks out to me is the scene where the really snooty British guy who's rude to the cab driver, he comes in and he's not able to get into the space. He has to like go through like all these processes, and he looks over briefly at Samuel L. Jackson passing him and everything. He almost seems like, maybe I'm reading something into the performance and anything, but the British guy almost seems kind of annoyed that like he's having to go through all these hoops to get in. I don't know. There's like hints of something.
He says
more
he's going to be castrated if he doesn't get there.
Yeah,
Like...
there seems like something there that something untapped in that critique of like, you know, European, like who has access to like European culture or whatever, or like, you know, even like sort of these artifacts. I don't know. I'm maybe grasping at straws here, but like there's something there that the movie I think doesn't quite.
I just think that the whole thing during Mao's communist reign definitely opens that gate up like an hour and 40 minutes in, and that's why I was more fascinated with it. Was, you know, they're literally like, we have to ban any Western instruments here, like, and it's clear that, you know, this one woman is like, oh shit, I can't like be purged or anything like that. And they literally are bringing up, like, at one point, like, you know, the person who is on the chopping block is literally like, I think, you know, I've been a teacher for so long, and I, you know, to quote this person, they're like, that person's been purged. And he's like, no, you're right. Like that was when I was starting to be like, okay, this is getting at something that the movie hasn't gotten before. And I get that that's the fourth installment out of the 5. They're 5, right? It's 5 or 6.
Well, it's Italy, Austria, England, China, Canada / America. Yeah, so 5. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I was most frustrated with that segment, where I was just like, okay, we're getting an Asian perspective, like not just that, but like an Asian an Asian perspective from the past, where things were not safe in terms of art, like in terms of anything, a lot of things in that type of culture. And I was like, this is where this is really starting to hook me.
Yeah.
And then that gets truncated too. So I absolutely think that you're right in terms of, and thank you for pointing that out. I mean, I absolutely think it's making a political statement with Samuel L. Jackson being the one who walks away with it. And the fact that it's making me think now that the fact that he is so toxic to everybody else and then gets away with it might also be a point. At the same time, and maybe it's that weird thing where it's like, it doesn't hit you over the head, which I'm appreciative of, but at the same time, it doesn't really, like, it's too much, like, every story is in the same kind of monotonous vein that doesn't really have any gradual rise of tension or dramatic interest, if that makes any sense.
100%. I completely agree. Yeah. It looks pretty samey throughout. And, like, yeah, like, it looks lovely throughout the movie. I mean, like, I love especially like any scene with like, you know, the light shining in through the windows and it has like that smoky texture. I always just love seeing that in a movie, just like any kind of tactility. But yeah, no, it looks basically the same. Like a lot of shots of like, you know, just sort of like 180s around people playing the violin and getting caught up in the music, and it's like, yeah, okay, like you kind of get used to it.
In the first segment, there's like a woman has died, and there's another woman holding a dead baby in her arms, and they just like cloak it over, and like. It's like, that's some really depressing shit. And then he kind of just goes over to the violin and is like, I need to get rid of this. And then it's on to the next story. And I get that, like, in terms of, like, the ways that people viewed things back then, I think it's trying to make a comment on history and, like, well, that's just the nature of life or something like that. But, like, by the time you get to the present day, it's kind of like, nobody's really acknowledging... That's the other thing. It's confusing to me, and why I can't truly dislike this movie while never being fully gripped by it, is it's trying to be about the history of this thing and the value of this thing in terms of economical status, as opposed to and cultural status. But people are literally like at an auction for it based on what it's worth financially. And yet at the same time, like, there's no dramatic stakes, to the point that when you get to an auction like that and you see how much literal, like, blood has been shed over this thing, it just feels like I just want the movie to be over at this point, for me at least. And that's not what you should have as a climax of a series of vignettes, where it's like, dude, they're like, children have died, people have died, it's gone through various cultures. Like, why is there no tension about this thing at all? Like, it's yeah, I used the word monotonous before, I'm gonna continue to use that word. So
yeah,
I feel like the plot is a lot of plot to get into because it's 5 individual plots. So
I mean, we could quickly run through it, I guess. I mean,
okay.
Italy, it starts out where like a woman is with child, and she has to have her fortune read, and she has like a series of tarot card readings, and those are kind of like the segments that like pop up throughout the movie, where it's like each card like is like, you know, like pops up, and like each segment, you know, like the devil and justice and travel.
Can we
Yeah.
talk about this though? Because
Sure.
she's like, I will ignore it if it's bad, and then it's all bad, and it's also about the violin. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's the
ultimately
twist, I guess. It's not about her traveling because she dies like the next day, but like it's.
But it's like barely a twist, because it's like, okay, if this is a flashback, it's literally a woman saying, I will ignore it if it's bad, and then reading all this bad stuff that's about to happen. And then they reveal it for each story. They reveal each card, and they're like, this one is about the devil, this one is about this one is about that. And
But you will live a long, great life. Yeah.
yeah. Where I'm just kind of like, and I don't mind it in terms of like what it's doing structurally, except that they just set it up as an old woman saying, I will ignore it if it's bad, and just like, you know.
The woman says like, I think the pregnant woman does say like, you know what, tell me everything. Like she does. I think she does say that as a response. And then yes, but no, you're right. It is like, yeah. And her husband like works in a violin shop, and he's like very exacting, where he's like smashing one of his apprentices' violins because it doesn't look great or whatever. Great, wonderful. And I'd love to see that kind of behavior. And then his wife dies during childbirth, and I missed that his child also passed away. I guess that was a very common thing back in those days when like medical science had not quite advanced.
They keep bringing up that she's old. She's very old for having a baby, and she's also like worried about it and everything. And he's like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And our child will grow up to be a great violinist and stuff like that. And she's consistently concerned. But again, like, I guess it would be okay if it served the rest of the stories, but instead it's just like, this is how it's going to play out. And there's no real, you know, weight to any of it.
Yeah, and then he like after his wife dies, he's like seen in his shop, and he like paints the violin red and then hangs it up, and then
with paint.
Yep, with paint.
With paint.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good point. Very good point, Kevin.
And then the next segment is the violin is taken to an orphanage. I'm not entirely sure how it gets there, but it ends up there, and like many orphans are shown playing it, and like, you know, sort of these montages where it's like dissolving, and it's like one child to another playing him. For a moment, I was briefly confused, where it's like, is this child like growing up? Why does he have different hairstyles? Oh wait, no, it's different kids like throughout the years playing the violin. And then there's like, you know, a guy comes to visit, and he's like, you know, very renowned, and he's like gonna take like someone with him, apprentice and mentor them to be a great violinist, and it's this kid who has a weak heart, and he's taken back with him, and you know, it's revealed that this guy who like seems to be someone of status is like he has this status to the monks, but to everyone else he's kind of like, everyone is not really taking him seriously because he's had like some bad mentees before. And he's really pushing this kid hard to be practicing and meet the pace of the metronome. And then when the kid is performing in front of a Prussian prince to perform with him, the kid gets stage fright and dies.
We've all been there.
Yeah. You ever feel like you're gonna just die of literal stage fright? Guess what? This kid did it. And then the violin is buried with the kid, but then I guess the grave is robbed. And then it's taken with like a group of travelers, like you see in like another dissolving montage, and ends up in a Romani camp. And they're on the property of an English violinist played by Jason Fleming. Sorry, I'm not naming the other. Sorry, I didn't name the other actors in the other thing.
We got it.
Yeah, Jason Fleming is the one I recognize, and he's this hotshot composer. You know, he's having sex in his dressing room before shows and delaying the start times. And
no.
Yeah, and then he is dating or involved with a woman played by Greta Scacchi, who is she wants to be a writer. She's like writing some sort of story, and he keeps distracting her by saying, "Have sex with you while I play the violin."
Typical.
Yeah, and then she gets like an opportunity to go write overseas, and he lets her, and she goes, and then like they sort of drift apart as they write letters, and he grows depressed and she's depressed, and then he eventually asks her to stop writing, and she returns and finds him having sex with one of the romantic women that we've seen earlier in the film, and she grabs a gun, threatens to shoot them both, but instead shoots the violin, and then she runs off.
You should have shot me.
Okay, first of all, that's kind of a moment that I was just kind of like, well, that's not the character speaking, that's the screenplay speaking. You know what I mean? Where I was just kind of like, I don't buy that this character would just be like, it's not your fault. Or your fault, and they even have the gun perspective of like her pointing the gun at her and then him. And I'm not gonna lie, a part of me, I know I mentioned that I wanted this to be a horror movie. As soon as she shot the violin, I just wanted to do like a scream from like The Thing or something, and just grow like arms and legs and just be like, ah! like I just did not buy it at all. Like I was just kind of like, that's such a contrivance. Like yeah,
and I feel like it should be like emotionally devastating when like Jason Fleming reads his voiceover. It's like, my darling, I'm sorry for what I've done. I'm gonna kill myself. I'm not sure how, but I'm gonna do it. And then like it just cuts to the next segment, and you're like, the fuck? Like this is like a terrible resolution. Yeah.
Who the fuck cares? He's an asshole. Like,
yeah. And then
I don't
the next,
give a shit.
and then
yeah.
And then again, I'm not entirely sure how it ends up from England to China, but you next see the violin on a boat to China, and it's delivered there to a shopkeeper. So it's like a pawn shop, it looks like, and the violin, and like the owner like seems to notice that it has like value because like there's like this little red jewel on the tip of it, and then he gives like just like a few bucks to the person selling the violin, and then I guess like he takes the little jewel, and then like over time you see like the shop prospering, and then the violin gets sold to this woman with a child. And then we flash forward, and it's Mao's Republic of China, where like, you know, they're like, you know, cracking down on like not letting only letting like certain types of music being played. And I think the little girl like is grown up now, and she's like one of the people who is like helping to crack down on like, you know, instruments being thrown into the fire and only certain types of music being played. And it turns out she's like a closet rebel. She's like keeping like records in her apartment, and like has all these hiding spaces for the violin and other musical artifacts. And it was funny, the scene where she's like cracking all the records, like, you know, to avoid getting caught or whatever, like, you know, breaking them and throwing to the trash and setting them on fire. It made me think, I watched Sex Lies and Videotape recently, which also has a scene where a character like just like destroys their tape collection. Yeah. Oh, so good, loved it. But I was just like, there is like something weirdly cathartic about watching someone just like take something that is like clearly important to them and like, you know, just like systematically destroy it, and then just like for some sort of deeper reason. Yeah.
Can I do a side tangent real quick and say, in ninth grade history class, I was told on a Monday to come in wearing white, and because we were learning about communist regimes, and it was just like, my teacher, who was very unorthodox, I will just say, was like, you will be purged if you don't follow these directions. And I wore a white shirt, the one white shirt I had, which was an Aqua Teen Hunger Force shirt. And I was just like, I'm not going to get purged at all. and he was just like, you are wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon milkshake, French fries, and a meatball. You are promoting a Cartoon Network show. You are purged. And he found a way to purge all of us. And it was very like, as a 14-year-old, we were like, this shit sucks. But like looking back on it, I'm kind of like, yeah, that guy shouldn't have been working with like high schoolers, but it is kind of darkly funny to think back on. I'm sorry.
That is fun. No, that's funny. And the phrase purge, I bet if he did that exercise now, people were like, oh, we're going to get purged? That has different meaning. Like, the franchise was like the association. It's like, so we get to do whatever we want now? Great.
Yeah. This was like 8 years before that whole franchise came to light. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, though.
No,
please continue.
I appreciated it.
This has been Aqua Teen Hunger Force Corner with Charlie Nash.
Yes. And now, back to the Red Violin.
Back to Mao's China, which I just want to let y'all know, if I was there, it wouldn't have gone down like that.
Thanks, Mark Wahlberg.
You're not taking my corn records, you son of a bitch.
So like the woman, I believe she's played by an actress named Sylvia Chang. She makes a mistake of telling her son about the violin and says, "Now this will be our little secret. Don't tell anyone." Then it cuts to him going up to his dad, who's also a member of the Republic, and like it says like, "Oh yeah, my mom is off doing something. Doing what? Well, she said it was a secret. I'm your father. Tell me right now." So, of course, the kid spills the beans, and then the soldiers storm in. She's not there, and she is taking the violin to one of the music instructors that we saw getting chewed out for promoting Western music. And she says, "Keep this violin safe," and he agrees to do it begrudgingly. And then, the segment ends. Again, one of those things where you're like, it ends on like the image of her husband like running his hands through his hair. Obviously, this marriage is fucked because like there's like these big secrets being kept. But then it's just like, all right, on to the next thing, like business as usual. And then there's a time cut again where, it's like the man who was keeping the violin and all these other instruments, I guess I would say like his side business. He has died many years later, and the violin is shipped off to Quebec, I guess, for an auction. And Samuel L. Jackson is the appraiser from New York. He comes in, and this violin just like gets his hooks into him. He can't stop obsessing over it, and he suspects that it's the Red Violin he's been hearing about, and he wants to get he's like looking at a copy over in England to see if like that's like the thing that he's looking at is like the source of the copy. And he's like tricking people. He's like sort of dodging people who think like that he might have something valuable. Like there's like a European musician who like asks like, "Oh, what if I played this one?" And Samuel L. Jackson's like, "Nope, not that one. Can't play that one. It's not really worth anything." And then eventually it comes out that this is the Red Violin, and there's a press release, and there's an auction where people are coming from all over to bid on it, including the monks over in is it Austria? Yeah, Austria, who are like, they have, it's funny to see the sight of like monks wearing these ancient robes, but like they have like coffee and like computers with them. Like that is like kind of funny, like just like the incongruity of that. And then Samuel L. Jackson, just like as he's like, walking out with the copy, he decides, you know what, I'm gonna make one last stop. I'm gonna walk into this auction and go behind the scenes and just switch the samples. I'll take the violin and
he pulled a fugitive. Yeah,
that is what I was thinking of. Yeah, and then he walks out, and Don McKellar's helping. Because he's been like his sort of partner in crime to like help like check like the varnishes and everything and the DNA samples. And then Samuel L. Jackson is driving home, and he makes a call to his wife, who he's been neglecting throughout this whole segment, and says, "Yeah, I'm sorry, baby, but you know what? I think it's all done now, and guess what? I have a gift for a kid." And then the movie's over. That's basically
if I was a kid and I got a violin, I'd be like, "Dad, I asked for a fucking PS2. You
gave
son
me a
of
chore
bitch."
now.
It was just like, there's a woman's blood in this paint. It's like, gross. Get out of here.
Yeah, gross.
I want to play Final Fantasy X. This is bullshit.
That's the reveal. Is that like the Italian carpenter or violin maker? He took his dead wife's body, cut off her hair and like put it inside the violin, and then like cut her wrists like to like drain the blood and everything, and use that and mix that with like the paint, so you can paint it with her blood. I guess to preserve her legacy. Seems like a bit of an over the top gesture, but that's just me.
I thought he cut off her hair to make a paintbrush to then smear her blood into the varnish.
I think you're right. Yes.
Yeah. I was like, am I watching an extreme movie from the 90s?
I didn't even put that together. I guess, but also the other thing that's really frustrating to me is like it keeps all of these segments are intercut with like character introductions of like, you better get me to this fucking auction now or I'll fucking murder you. And it's like expecting that it's like setting up stakes, but as you said, Bryden, it's not about the characters at all. It's just about the fucking violin. So it's like, it really isn't,
that happen to them.
Yeah, it really doesn't have to do with stakes at the auction. Like for me at least, that was what I was expecting was, we're learning about these characters' backstories are going to be interspliced, so by the time that they get to the auction, we will know what they have to lose if they lose this violin. And instead, it's just about the importance of the violin. It's not really about anything. There's no dramatic tension by the time Samuel L. Jackson steals this fucking thing. Like, it really, like... It's just ridiculous. Like, it's not ridiculous. It's just it's
pretty ridiculous.
And maybe the movie's
I'll say it.
Yeah. And maybe the movie's like, well, that's the whole point. It's all about this object, and they don't realize the whole importance that it has. And I'm just kind of like,
What
Yeah, but-
importance?
Yeah,
That it's
yeah.
lived a long life? I think this violin is kind of, maybe I've just been watching too much Evil Dead, but this violin is kind of like the Necronomicon of the music world, kind of. Just wherever it goes, people are gonna die. People are gonna die or screw somebody over. Also, with the Montreal segment, I thought it was funny how the guy comes in to play all of them, and he really wants to play the red violin, and then he plays it, and he's like, "Oh, there's nothing special about this." And then when he hears about it, he calls him up. He's like, "You son of a bitch! You did not tell me this was the red violin. You son of a bitch." Or it's just like, "Oh, now you like it. Oh, okay."
I was just waiting for someone to start playing that thing, and then the ghost from the Ark of the Covenant or something came out and melted everybody's faces off. But that's just me.
All these things you're naming would make for a more interesting movie. Yeah, it's...
Yeah. We got any more final thoughts on violins, stringed instruments? What about we big fans of the cello around here? Only when Madison Bell plays it, or what?
Does anyone remember that episode of Figure It Out where remember that Nickelodeon show where they had to solve the hint or they get slimed or something? Anyone else remember the one where like everyone failed to guess that the kid could play the cello with his foot? That's all.
Then they come out and do it, and they're just like, "Oh, gross."
Oh, and they're all just already covered in like green gook. Like it's just like
For like good 10 years, Nickelodeon was like, "You know what the funniest shit of all time is?" It was just like Kids' Choice Awards. If you just go up there and present an award, it doesn't matter what you say, you're gonna get fucking slimed, bruv. We should start doing that. I'll start doing #1 songs, top 5 of the weekend. What movie won Kids' Choice Awards that year? What went home with the blimp?
the orange blimp. Oh Jesus Christ!
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at KevBonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at JDoyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CTNash91. Once again, thank you for listening.